Hello, my friends. How you doing? It's your buddy Phil here, project management trainer and coach. I hope you're doing well. We're going to revisit a very controversial video that I put out in 2020, I believe it was, or 2021. I think it was 2020. And the title of the video is PMBOK Guide 7, Disaster Waiting to Happen. Now, I received all sorts of colorful comments. Some people were outraged that I would dare challenge the putting out of the 7th edition in the form it was. But truth be told, when you find something that is not right, you got to speak out, or you're just part of the problem. If you truly believe that something is not right, you should speak out. If you believe it's right, then push it forward. But if you believe something's wrong, you got to speak out. So I spoke out and I said the 7th edition was a disaster waiting to happen in the form that I had seen it, in the form that it had been presented. And moreover, we didn't really see the full picture of the 7th edition until it came out. Well, here's the 7th edition, okay? The PMI kept a lot of it shrouded in mystery until they released it. And when they released it, everyone could see what was done. We hadn't seen the domains. We hadn't seen the methods, models, artifacts, a lot of that stuff we hadn't seen. Now, when it came out, I took a look at the book, and many of you have read and seen my reviews. And I realized that there had been some damage control. I was very happy about that. I was very happy that they hadn't completely gotten rid of the narrative of the process groups and the knowledge areas, because that is the bread and butter of project management. Okay, so I was happy that they made reference to the 5 process groups, the knowledge areas, and all that stuff, and it's still in Standards Plus. But when you take a look at this book, my friends, be perfectly honest, perfectly honest. If you haven't read it, then don't even bother. But if you have read it, be honest. Which of these books opens up the dialogue for what project management is better? Is it this one or is it this one? Why don't you put a comment below and let me know what you think as far as which of these books makes the most compelling argument for what project management is, what portfolio management is, and what program management is. And tell me which of these flows better in the narrative for a beginner in project management. Now, I don't want you to get caught up on the size. Actually, size doesn't matter in this case. But I want you to be perfectly honest, because what I have noticed in this book, the 7th edition, it's lean. It's got some really good points. It emphasizes parts that this doesn't have, like the principles, the mindset that you need to have before you practice project management. However, this is missing that narrative, that thread that meanders through the definitions of project management quite laboriously in this book, but thoroughly, such that if you sat down to read it with an open mind, chapter 1 and 2 and 3 pretty much set the foundation for project management. In such a way, this does not. That's just the honest truth. So when I said disaster waiting to happen, it's not as if the earth is going to open up and people are swallowed. That's not what I was talking about. But the disaster that I was referring to is having an artifact that is almost obsolete, such that no one is even using it to train the PMP exam or project management. Today, when people are training project management, do you know what they go to? Do you know what they ask people to read? It's not this one. Anyone telling you to go read this one, they're in La La Land. They're in a different world somewhere. because this is not the one to read if you want to understand the granular details, the essence, the basics of projects, programs, portfolios, benefits management, business cases, project charters, leading up to where we authorize the project. It's not here, my friends. If you didn't know this now. It's not this. This is why I said disaster waiting to happen, because you've got the most current version of the PMBOK Guide 7th edition, the most current version of the PMBOK Guide, and no one's referring to it. You ask people, have you read the 7th? Crickets. Ask anyone, I put it to you, ask anyone who passed the exam in 2021, 2022, how many times they opened this book? 0. Now ask them how many times they opened this one. I'm not done. Ask them how many times they open this book. I tell you, the amount of times people open a combination of this and this far outweighs the amount of times people even remotely referred to this book, even as an afterthought. And it's sad that resources were spent, human, equipment, material, supplies, meetings, money, reviews, of course, with many of us in absentia. They came out with a book. Now, when a PMBOK guide used to come out in the past 3 decades, and you're getting ready for an exam such as the PMP, you pay attention to the most current version because there is value and substance in it. And there's also reference to the exam. But since this one came out, people are like, what's the point? Now, you have certain individuals who, whatever PMI does is right, and PMI is infallible. In fact, it's sacrilege to criticize anything that's PMI produced. But that's a very myopic, pedestrian way of thinking. Use your brain, project manager. They got you certified for a reason, because you can think, right? My students challenge me and call me out on stuff that they see and they feel this isn't right. And a lot of the times they are correct. So no one's infallible. I can't tell you how many emails, and look, if you're in PMI, do a search for emails I've sent to the PMI about corrections in the 6th edition. I'm not saying the 6th edition is so superior that there are no errors in it. There are errors. And if people in PMI can check email records, they will find numerous emails. Some of the emails I say, hey, my student found an error in the PMBOK guide. So I'm not saying there's no errors in any PMBOK. All I'm saying to you is that when there's something wrong, you got to call it out. And this, it doesn't have enough value for people to stand on, for people to rest on and say, you know what, the old edition of the guide, nah, I don't really need to refer to that. No. Students are referring to the 49 processes because this does not have legs to stand on. It does not. Now, let me tell you what I do like about this. It's not to do with the size. I like certain things that were called out in the 7th edition. I like the 12 principles. I like the first one that's on stewardship. It's a great mindset. I like the principle on complexity. I like the one on ambiguity. I also like the fact that they whittled down the methods, models, and artifacts. Thank goodness. Hallelujah. Thank goodness. Those are all great things. I also like them calling out metrics as one of those that we need to think about. So when you take a look at these domains, the performance domains, I was quite happy that they called out the metrics. Let me tell you the performance domains that I would have found to be a great addition to the 6th edition. Just adding these has greatly expanded the world of project management through the PMI lens. There are a few. So let me go back to the page where it all starts. Let's go to page 7. Page 7 in part 2. You see, this is another wacky part of the 7th edition. It has numbering for part 1, and then it has numbering for part 2. And people are looking at part 2 and they're saying, my goodness, how come it only has 270 pages? No, that's not true. You got to add the pages from part 1. There's 67 pages in part 1, add them to part 2, then you get the full number. Isn't that wacky? It's crazy. You might as well have just done 2 publications since you feel the need to number them differently. Hello. I mean, just like we did for the Agile Practice Guide and the PMBOK Guide, just separate them if you feel the need to number them differently, you see? But anyway, page 7 in part 2, it has the domains. Now, I really want to hone in on some of the domains that I feel are great. The team domain, I like the narrative. It's very good. It's wholesome. It's very good dialogue that is not in the 6th edition. Okay. So that dialogue of team, perfect. I like that. The other thing that's good in the 7th edition in the domains, the development approach and life cycle. Oh, that's really, really good to call that out. Now, I wouldn't have called them domains. I would have bolted on team. I mean, what stopped you from saying team knowledge area, right? Just separate them, because PMI did this in the past, right? It was communications management, and they carved out the stakeholder piece from communications and made it its own knowledge area. What I would have done, I would have carved out team, humans. For goodness sake, don't call people resources. Call people what they are, human, team, right? I would have taken this domain and made it a knowledge area. And that would have been perfect. That would have been, that would have been really good. Because when you bunch people, humans with all of the material, supplies, facilities and stuff, it just diminishes the value that a human brings. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. I mean, we need to go take some lessons from the Agile Alliance, because they knew, right? The 17 who wrote the Agile Manifesto, they knew what to do. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable product, right? That shows people who know that people deserve their own knowledge area, right? So I would have carved team out to be its own knowledge area. Going through the other list, planning, that's redundant. Project work, pretty redundant. Delivery, redundant. Measurement, aha, now we're talking. That's really some great stuff, because a lot of times we're measuring the wrong things. We're not really focusing on the right stuff. I like the measurement domain. Again, I wouldn't have made this a knowledge area, but I would have taken measurement and really beefed it up in monitor and control project work, and really expanded the importance of fine-tuning those metrics and measurements in a report. That's what I would have done. Uncertainty. Uncertainty is a nice domain content, but I would have taken that and I would have probably put that into the risk chapter, beefed it up a little bit more in the risk chapter. So those aren't bad at all. All right. One other thing that is wrong with this, a lot of times people don't really study books for themselves. They rely on hearsay. And I don't want you to do that. Read this book for yourself, go through it, celebrate the successes, call out the failures, because guess what? There's going to be an 8th edition. And you, if you're one of the reviewers, hey, if PMI decides to let us do this time, right? If they do, then you need to say something when you see things that are out of whack or not in alignment. That's why you're a PMI member. That's why you're one of the family. It's a family thing. This isn't one person's business or 2 people's business or 200 people's business, as they carved out a select group of 200 and something and said they review. That's not how it's done. It's very poor. We can learn a lot from the world of Agile. Let's learn from Jim Highsmith, his decision spectrum. The Highsmith decision spectrum allows you to show your convergence on a continuum, right? Where the teams aren't converging, why would you plow on and release a book? That's a family thing, except you don't value it as a family, as a team thing. Gone are the days when we would say, oh, we got too many people, we don't know how to harvest data. Are you kidding me? We got millions of individuals being interviewed in various spheres every day in some fields, and that data is gleaned and whittled down. Come on now. Surely someone at PMI can glean data from the millions of people who have invested in the firm, who have invested in the certifications. So I was really upset when they decided to plow ahead and release this thing without a complete thorough read by anyone who cared to. They kind of circumvented it. And that's why I said it's a disaster waiting to happen, because look, now who's using it? Now, another one of my pet peeves about this book, when I compare it to this, and someone says, oh, this is good. It has agile and it has the way forward and it has hybrid. You're mistaken, my friend. You're mistaken. Some very minuscule mentions of hybridization and showing incremental. By the way, let me bring this one up. The narrative for incremental and iterative is different from this. Why can't there be congruence and alignment in the world of the PMI? Okay, now, if you are from PMI, go take this feedback to PMI, because they're not congruent. Pages 18 and 19 of this book, they do not align with this. The whole mantra about iterative being a single delivery and repeated until correct, it's very well stated here. This muddies the waters, talking about iterative, almost the same way this is talking about incremental. It's very poor, very poor. The other thing I have issues with in this book is, being that people are touting this as, oh, it's progressive and the way forward and agile. Let's see how many times agile is mentioned here. I'm going to get my electronic copy open up, and we're going to take a look at a few things. Let's do a quick search for the words agile. Apart from the people who have agile in their certificate titles at the back of the book, agile appears in this narrative. It says, organizations with flatter structures, customer-centered initiatives, and more adaptive delivery approaches may adopt an agile center of excellence. That's one place we find the word agile center of excellence. The next one, it says, the agile center of excellence, then continues the narrative, focuses on coaching teams, building agile skills. That's the other place we see the word agile mentioned. See that? All right. The other places that agile is mentioned, at the back of the book in X53, it's talking about, along with lean, agile, and design thinking principles, nothing to really define what agile is. Now, if you go to the back of the book, it appears one more time here. So if you go to the back of the book and you take a look at page 235, part 2, it says agile, a term used to describe a mindset of values and principles as set forth in the Agile Manifesto. Being that the Agile Manifesto is so mammoth, what would it have cost to take page 8 and 9 and just put it in here? There's no good coverage of the Agile Manifesto. I look at that as being unfortunate, right? Very unfortunate. The next time you see agile is under development approach. The next time you see agile is under hybrid approach. Just as a definition, they talk about the value delivery office VDO, and it talks about building agile skills. And to be perfectly honest with you, there's really no coverage of agile here within the text that gives a very good definition of agile. You see it in some pockets here and there as part of other definitions. But if you really want great agile coverage, this is your book. It's not this, okay? And you do know that the PMP exam right now has a ton of agile. This is not the book, okay? It's not. Now, of those firms that use agile, you probably have heard that roughly 70 to 90, I've heard different numbers, use the most popular of the agile frameworks known as Scrum. When you take a look at this book and you do a search for the word Scrum, it's as though it was deliberately kept out of sight. So on page 179, we have the daily stand-up talked about, page 179. And that is the only place you find the word Scrum. Of course, in the glossary, that refers to page 179. Are you kidding me? Scrum that is used by almost 12 million people worldwide. You couldn't even have the gumption to put Scrum in this book? Seriously? And you tell me this is progressive? That's a problem, my friends. So while we celebrate the fact that this is very tiny, it's very, very tiny. Yes, I know. Right? Not as tiny as this one, but it's very tiny. Think about value. It's not about the size. It surprises me how weak and how unprofessional some people are. Come on now, we're in the world of project management. You're complaining about 300 pages. You should go work for the government and take a look at 500, 1,000 page project management plans and project charters. What kind of weak project managers are we talking about here that shrivel up under 300 pages and say, oh yeah, this is just... Some project charters are this big. Some plans are this big. So let's stop babysitting these PMs who say, oh, the PMBOK Guide 6th edition was too big. Thank goodness we got this little one. Now, I have to be perfectly honest with you. I hate difficult. I like making it simple. I love keeping it simple. Could this be made a little bit simpler? Of course, it could, but not to become this. That's my problem. And I don't want us to diminish the profession. The profession of project management, many a time, requires a project manager with a high tolerance for ambiguity, very high. There's some projects that they will not put a PM on except that PM has demonstrated a high tolerance for ambiguity. I know what I'm talking about. I've worked in aerospace, I've worked in engineering, I've worked in construction, I've worked in gaming, I've worked in healthcare. So I'm telling you what is fact. Some PMs will not make the cut to work for a lot of companies because they don't have the ability to absorb huge amounts of information. But that should be developed as part of a project manager's abilities. I'm not saying everyone, but heaven help us if we don't have enough project managers to work on the very complex, robust projects that need the absorption of a lot of data. Sometimes you're on a project and you got to understand it within a day. And this is a project that's going to run for many months. You got to be put on it and understand it, hit the ground running and move. The problem now is we have a lot of lightweight project managers that don't want to go the full mile. They're always looking for shortcuts, always looking for... That is not it, my friends. And mark my words, you're going to find PMs who are PMPs, but they've developed a poor mindset, copping out. They don't want to go the full distance. Don't be like that. Stay in there. Know your craft, okay? And when you take a look at both books, learn the best of both worlds. I'm not saying this is useless, but this really is not the best that PMI could do. If it was, people would be using this. The problem is it fails to capture the essence of project management adequately. This is laborious. Yes, it's big. I'm not a fan of the size, but PMI could have done better. They could have. Now, I want to give you my honest opinion about the volume of content here. This is not sufficient. This will not sustain you as a PM. And I know this firsthand because in the past couple of years, I've written 5 books on project management of different sizes, okay? One of the books I recently wrote with my awesome buddy, Roy, who co-trains with me, is called PMP Exam Immersion. This has got agile content, predictive content, and more. It's called PMP Exam Immersion. There is no way you can capture the full essence of robustness that a PM needs to understand in this book and this book and some of the great things that are here without you going into the 400-500s of pages. If you really want to capture the full essence so that you can refer to it, just like many other people do. One of my students said, Phil, I have your book on my table right now. I'm using it as a reference. And this is the book that we wrote before the exam changed. And the reason is there's so much great content in it. PMI have given us so many great thoughts and content over the years. But we shouldn't let that diminish. So if you find yourself being part of the 8th edition panel, be honest and truthful. Does that publication sustain project management? Does it supersede the 6th? Does it help make a more compelling argument for project management? And if the answer is no, you shouldn't just roll over like a little puppy dog and accept anything. There is great conflict, positive conflict, constructive conflict. Many of us were not in agreement. You probably can find a number of videos that my buddies and I from PMI who are certified, that's what they don't work for PMI, but well, PMI family. So I'm talking about PMPs, Mark and Susan. We put some information together and we said, project management, past, present, and future, these are our thoughts. You got to make a difference, my friends. Otherwise, it just remains status quo or gets worse. Okay, so my main point about this, are there some great things in here? Absolutely. Are there some other good inclusions? I could go on and on showing you the great inclusions, but ain't no one using it. And ain't none of that stuff on the exam yet. Maybe it will appear on the exam, but there are a number of favorite places in here, but it's not about that. You know, I have a lot of other favorite places here. I like the fact that information radiators are talked about, burn down charts are talked about, story points are talked about, but they're missing the agile foundation. So if a newbie picks this up, what good is it? The whole talk about earned value is like just dropped out of nowhere and fell in here. Earned value is a passion of mine. Not really happy at how it's presented here. I like the fact that the pages are in color, but it's not about that. It's not. I like the fact that the net promoter score was added. I like the fact that they added leading and lagging indicators. This is from the chapter I told you was one of my favorite chapters in here about measurements and stuff. And I like the fact that they included the Hersey-Blanchard model, even though they didn't credit Paul Hersey as being one of the co-creators of it. It wasn't just the work of Ken Blanchard. You know, so it's got all sorts of peaks and valleys, you know, good and not so good. So that was the sense-making session for you. For those of you that were waiting for a second part, because I told you I'll keep releasing these disaster waiting to happen videos until it came out, and then we finally saw what it was. And you just ask, who is using this book to train? Not even PMP, who's using it to train, period. It's a drop in the bucket. It's a drop in the bucket. I'm not saying I haven't used it to train, but it cannot sustain major project management dialogue and reference. Right? I've actually written a book on the 7th edition. It's called The Layman's Guide to Project Management. You find it out there. I whittled it down to 123 or so pages, and I made it a very small book, 6x9, because the stuff that is in here, yeah, it could be really condensed. It's good, it can be condensed, but it's not enough. And in that book, I actually added some stuff from the 6th because it's just not enough to sustain the project management narrative. All right, so those are my thoughts. Hey, share your thoughts. I'd really like to know what you think. If you've read the 7th cover to cover, I want you to comment. What do you think about the 7th? What do you think? Does it sustain the narrative for project management? Does it sustain the narrative for Agile? Let me know what you think. All the very best. For those of you who are studying for the PMP exam, I still recommend reading the principles, understanding the principles. Got some really good stuff in the principles. That's about it in my mind until further notice, because it's just not enough to sustain the study. All right, thank you very much for joining me, and I wish you all the very best. Bye for now.